So I brought a fun beer in glass.
Is it barrel aged?
Listen to how unimpressive this is.
You're gonna ruin my expensive table.
Yeah, they didn't sand out all the plane marks here, and it's also has a big gap on that side. Where'd you get this on? Craigslist or something?
Facebook Marketplace.
No, that's like Craigslist for politicians.
You know what's funny is you're using the same microphone a congressman used.
Ooh, am I gonna get sick? So I'm just kind of wiping off the dust. There's a little bit of dust on here.
It's an old bottle.
Yeah, it's an old bottle. So this is the first barrel-aged beer that we packaged at Buried Acorn 6 years ago.
Damn.
We started brewing in fall 2017. And we didn't open until summer 2018. This one came out in maybe January of 20. What's the year after 2018?
2019.
That would be the year that this came out. January or February 2019. It's gonna overflow. Oops.
Wow, look at that.
It's like I did it on purpose. What is a little more juice in here?
Say hi to Instagram.
Hey, Instagram, vote for me.
Wow, look at this. That's funny because it's a 2021 Bottle Society glass.
That's true. Predates the glassware that it's in, which I don't know if that's a thing, but anyway.
So because there's so much foam, should I do the oil nose and then or just let it sit?
I didn't think that was any longer a controversy.
I think it is. You mean you didn't think that it was like effective, the oil from the nose?
No, I didn't think that foam in beer was a bad thing anymore.
Okay.
I thought we learned that as a community, a beer community, last year in January.
Just shoot it.
Shoot it. So this beer is, like I said, brewed in the fall of 2017. And then blended out in the fall of 2018 and released in February 2019. It was our first oak-aged beer release. So it's been in a bottle for quite some time. It's
how many of these do you still have left?
Only probably 4 or 5.
Really? And you brought one for me?
Yeah. No, I pulled it from the market and put it in my basement because I wanted to save them. But it's neat. It's got a lot of like really long fruit flavors, like that kind of linger for a while. Not fruity, like super big, like an IPA or something. Like it's like hit you over the head, but like it really has a lot of length to it. It like, kind of sticks with your palate for a long time.
It's like gray stone fruit. That was a good tasting note, wasn't it?
I'm gonna go again. I'm going in for a second sip here. See if I can taste some of this grayness.
It's like muted stone fruit. It is bright, mildly acidic.
Yeah, mildly acidic. It's got a little leathery kind of a finish, like kind of sticks with you.
It feels heavy.
Kind of fades off of that. It fades off of that kind of fruit thing that's really long, but then it kind of fades into like a little bit of a toothpick wood kind of like feel. It's just really nicely connected there. I think the aromatics coming off of it are a little not aggressive. I would say they're a little bit like subtly stanky.
Should all beer be treated this way? Like
no.
Okay, so like we're sitting next to Blue Light.
Right.
Zuba's.
Whatever the fuck that means.
Zuba's. The contrast here is crazy. I'm sitting, for all of you who are listening, I am sitting here on the desk with a can of Blue Light, Labatt Blue Light with the Zuba's can. It's 10:05 a.m. And then a glass of this beer that was started production in 2017. And so the difference is the contrast is there. I grabbed a can of Blue Light because I didn't have any water, and the next best thing is Blue Light at 10 a.m. to record a podcast. So this beer in the bottle should be treated the way we've been treating it. Correct?
Yeah, kind of just dwell on it for a little moment.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a really super intense beer.
But blue light should not be treated the same way.
I think that certain beers, like some people call them utility beers or just like everyday drinkers, tend to be something that is more of a thirst quencher and a libation than it is a journey of flavor.
Why is the gap between Red Cat, let's just say, or box, cheap wine, and the vastness of extraordinary wine? It feels like that gap is so long between the two. Whereas in beer, it feels like something like this 7-year-old barrel-aged beer and Blue Light is so close together.
Yeah, there's like wine and beer, like so oak-aged beer and some of like the more complex wines have a lot of similar through line characteristics. They have a lot of very similar, like that stone fruit thing that you said, that's a descriptor that comes from the wine world.
Yeah.
In the wine industry, I would say probably more specifically just in the U.S., because if we talk outside of the U.S., beer's an entirely different thing. Like the U.S. reinvented beer like 20 years ago, and they've been riding it for 18, 20 years. In the past 2-3 years, it's been not so much of a fun ride. But I would say that in the U.S., and really also in the rest of the world, wine has been established for a very, very, very long time. Not that beer hasn't, but as a flavor, nuanced, big, complex beverage, that wasn't really thought of for 50, 60 years in beer.
Yeah.
It was the only thing that beer was what you have in the Zubes can.
Yeah.
That was what beer was for a very, very long time, since the Bushes came in and the Millers came in and brought, and really created in parallel the same thing that was happening in Bavaria, which was upgrading the technology for beer, right? They're doing steam technology, they're doing it in stainless, they're doing it in pressurized tanks, as opposed to like oak and the industrial revolution of beer, let's say, which happened at the same time as it did in Bavaria in the U.S. So when that happened, everybody was, after a short order, taking character out of beer and making the lightest, the most drinkable, easy drinking beer that they could. And it didn't stop after Prohibition either. After Prohibition, it just, that's who came in.
Yeah.
Those are the companies that came in that were big enough to launch. And that's what they launched because it's the most affordable to make, for sure. And also, especially on a large scale. And also, it's the most drinkable. Mm. You could drink 16 of those. I couldn't drink 4 of these. This is enough, 5-6 ounces. Yeah. Same as like a big Bordeaux. The reason why it's $500,000 for a bottle is because you're having one $100,000 glass out of it in your lifetime.
Yeah.
In the U.S., for such a long time, the last 20 years excluded, there's been a tradition of very small, very, very nuanced, subtle, small like flavors as far as being light beer, and craft turned that on its head. So the people who have had this in their lives for the last 20 years are people of our age, right? And that's new, right? So those flavors are really kind of new to the American people. And so there's not really been an established value to something like this. So yes, this has a different value than something like that. Not monetarily. I mean just as an experience.
Yeah.
And the value that this brings as an experience is something that even still now, and probably more so now than even 5 years ago, has not really been communicated to the American public through generations of, hey, this is what you taste when you taste this region's grape or whatnot, and this side of the hills grape, even, how they can say the elevation of this grape harvest makes it taste like whatever, which is probably a little bit of not true, but that thinking around beer is the way that we approach beers like this. When I approach beers like our lager beer, I spend very, very close attention to make sure that it's perfect and has the edges that I want and be refreshing and quaffable. I don't necessarily think that I'm breaking any ground as far as putting new flavors together, what have you, but I am filling a container with a liquid that people want to buy, and that is primarily my business. So that portion, that's a totally different thing, right? The same way that Red Cat is much more different than Sonoma-Cutrer Chardonnay, Oak Age Chardonnay, something like it's totally different, right?
Yeah.
One sweet. Characters are juice flavors, very kind of simple, but people drink a shitload of it.
Yeah.
But when you buy a bottle of Sonoma-Cutrer, not that that's like a really high-end wine, but it's a pretty good like thing that most people have kind of, if you drank wine, probably tried. And it's a really good bottle of Oak Age Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And has a lot of cool little nuances from the oak, from the like cinnamon to butter and all that, those kinds of flavors. I think people just don't talk about beer that way because it just hasn't been enough time.
You think it's also like area? I mean, if you could pick up buried Acorn and bring it to Pacific Northwest or, wherever the fuck, small enough town with enough educated people to appreciate your barrel-aged beer. Like, if you could snap your fingers and make a barrel-aged only smaller brewery that just exists off beer sales and food, and you're in a community that appreciates that, would you do it?
I would do it in Syracuse again.
You would do that in Syracuse. I don't think Syracuse is ever going to appreciate that.
That's okay. My family's here, and this is where my life is. So this is where I try and keep the last 7 bottles in my basement to myself and not talk to anybody. And I think that in this stage in my life, like I can't pick up and go anywhere because I have 2 awesome children in the middle of their awesomeness, like 9 and 11, and I'm coaching baseball and my wife's coaching cheer, she's doing the cheer thing, right? She's got that going, and it's like we're traveling. It's like, but would there be more success to our business if it were in a different place? I don't know. I know some really very, very like the highest respected breweries that make these styles of beers that were in some of the beer towns like Denver, Southern California, and they closed. They may have closed because they're like, okay, I'm done with this stage in my life. People that create these types of beers and start these types of companies aren't starting them to create the next Labatt and take a huge market share and be out there, promoting the one brand to make the newest, flavor of White Claw or whatever it might be, right? They do this because they're passionate about the flavors that they've created on maybe a smaller scale or that they've tasted somewhere else, and they want to bring those flavors to people and make a go of it. Yeah. And do something that they really are passionate about and enjoy. Yeah. And that's where this portion of my life is. Will that mentality put us out of business? Yeah, absolutely. Every business has an expiration. I'm not the next Cantillon where I'm going to be like running this thing 300 years from now. Yeah. Right? Well, I won't live that long. Yeah. Just do the math on that. Right. But we've been able to, in the past, create a space and a product and something that we really, really believe in, and an experience that we believe in, where we are as far as our tap room and like bringing what we love about consumption of these products and foods and all these different things. We did it, right? We did it, and we enjoyed it, and it's not always enjoyable, especially when you have so many curveballs over the past 4.5 years, really, even both like industry trends and like global trends as far as consumption goes with certain types of libation. But we did it, and whether it lasts 2 more months or 50 more years, the success of the last 7 or say years, 6.5 years or so, have been a really, really fun ride. Is it getting to be too much? Yeah. Any business owner pretty much over the past 7 years has seen a lot, especially on the really small, like super intimate, like, every single day when you wake up, you might be making your kids breakfast, but your thumb is still on the business, right? Whether it's, you're like, okay, I'm checking my emails. It's not 9 a.m. yet, so I haven't gotten 70 bill collectors emailing me at 9:01. But those types of things like occupy way too much of your mind, right? So those business owners they have really intimate, customer facing businesses have seen such a super hard struggle.
Yeah.
It's just been, you talk to guys every day on it, it's been a lot for people's mental health, and not just in this industry, restaurant, beer, hospitality, in a lot of industries.
Yeah. I don't talk to too many restaurant owners who have their end in sight. Unless they're incredibly they're dead, they've been struggling financially for a while, then they're trying to find the end. But there aren't too many entrepreneurs in the food space that I talk to where they're not even on day one, because I don't know how many people go in on day one thinking to themselves, all right, here's where I want to get to, and then I'll be done. But I do hear from other entrepreneurs and other businesses, other sections of business, that especially in tech and that kind of stuff, where they go into it with an exit insight. You know, it's all right, I'm creating this to do this, and once it does that, I'll be done. I'll sell it, I'll pass it on, whatever the case is. I feel like it's so funny that the hospitality is a very difficult barrier to entry. There's a lot of money that's offered up to people getting into hospitality. And I don't know if that's just the banks are here's a sucker, let's get them for 5%. Or if it's just even some of them are stupid and they're thinking to themselves well, everybody's got to eat, as to why there's so much money that's handed out freely to people getting into restaurants. But it's one of the worst businesses to open. It's not an easy entry into the industry, just based on the amount of money you have to spend, the length of time for your lease, all the things that have to go into it. It's so much easier to start a business and get into content, marketing,
import, export,
anything.
Yeah.
And that requires such little investment. And yet, I'm sure that if I was intimately involved with those businesses, I would also see all the dumbasses that get into those industries.
Someone's pinching your arm there too.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But it just still baffles me as to how many people get into the restaurant industry on a daily basis. And it's stop fucking doing it. Stop fucking doing it.
It's so opening a restaurant is so very hard, right? So capital intense, right? Try opening a brewery, right?
So much more regulations, licensing.
And big stainless steel tanks and kettles and processing equipment, called chillers and infrastructure, build outs and big drains and those types of things are so fun, right? They're very expensive, right? So if you want to get into the beer business, that's what you're faced with. And my business at one point was just beer business. For the first 5 years of what we did, we only served beer, some occasional ciders, some occasional foods when the dictator that ran New York required us to sell. We sold Uncrustable peanut butter sandwiches, but now we have a full menu. If you're looking for a more expensive way to get into the restaurant industry, open a brewery and realize that nobody comes unless you have food. And then you put in a kitchen for the same amount that you would normally have, put in to open a restaurant. And then you've got $1 million brewery behind you and a $400,000 kitchen to your left. Now you've got both. And really, you're just selling food anyways. Over the past 2 months, I would say for the first time since we started doing food, every single day we sell more food than beer, which is something that didn't happen prior to the last few months. I have been forced.
The food's that good, huh?
It must be, right? Yeah. We've been forced to become a restaurant.
Yeah.
And every brewery that's still around today is kind of getting into that. Oh man, I got into this because I love beer, but now I'm a restaurateur.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's where this journey's taken us. It's not something either one of us prefer, which is surprising because Crystal, who heads up the kitchen, my wife, She went to Kendall. She did culinary arts and opened a lot of restaurants in Chicago and was very successful at it, but decided it wasn't for her. And then I roped her back into doing it. I was like, yeah, but we have this brewery and people are consuming less beer. Let's do food. It'll be fun. Oh, well, I was wrong. But I do enjoy where we're at right now in certain aspects. I enjoy where we're at right now because her and I are deciding what we're going to do. And it's a pretty fast-paced, like, it doesn't feel that way when you're in it, but it's a pretty fast-paced, like, movement towards a decision.
Stop messing with your joke.
Why?
So I'm trying to get us even on the camera.
Oh.
Stay right there.
So I would say, well, because it's fun because you pull a lever and you go, oh, you fall. And it allows me to satisfy my distracting thoughts. I have...
right there, perfect.
Right here?
Drop down just a little bit.
Oh.
A little bit more. Perfect.
Oh, okay. So I guess what I'm saying is yeah, running a restaurant sucks, and we're looking to make some decisions that make it easier on us. You know, staffing it is nearly impossible. Predicting how many people come in is nearly impossible, and that's the biggest hang up.
I'd say that you're probably in a similar position as I am. Except I make money. No, but just trying to, it is difficult. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know how restaurants do it who don't just start with an insane amount of capital. And I think that is like the trick, but just trying to figure out, like, listen, who's going to be around? Like, what money's going to come in next month and what can you afford? You know, I'm at the point with the business between social media clients, people renting the podcast studio for their own podcast, restaurants reaching out to me and paying me to come out and make videos for them, and then like other things I'm just trying to develop to make sure that I have money down the road. And
oh yeah, like when you sell your airtime to politicians.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I would love it if you.
Yeah, right.
I would love it if. Are you kidding me? That's such like if I got paid for that podcast, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, right.
But it's difficult to like in social media management for restaurants. There's just so much turnover. There can be so much turnover coming into, especially after the holidays, that it's like, all right, what the fuck's going to happen now? It's 38 years old with a wife and a son at home. It's like, I don't want to be in that position anymore. You know, I don't want to be in the position of like, fuck, I need, like, honey, I'm not going to pay myself this week because this jackass didn't pay their invoice on time, you know?
When you have little ones,
Yeah.
when you have offspring that you're, required to look out for, the uncertainty of the restaurant industry is too much.
Yeah.
And that's okay for a little while, but you gotta have like a real strong footing for these kids so they, can go off to, run your brewery when you're done.
I wonder if this is the age of, are we living in a time where there's like more entrepreneurship and small business owners than there ever has been, A, and B, just thinking about that with kids and the stress and the fickleness of being a small business owner, especially for, I don't know how many years, I don't know when that crossing point happens where it's like, all right, it's still a struggle, but it's not as much of a struggle anymore. But just how they deal with, like, how your kids deal with that uncertainty of their parents being business owners.
It's weird. Like, we ran into that a couple times with our kids, 9 and 11, and we closed 2 businesses last year. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of like, oh, because they know that, at that age, they know that that's how we, supposedly make money. Right. And they're like, wait. And I'm like, well, we'll still have the original. They're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And it's like, holy crap. That is pretty heavy.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather was a very successful business owner. And, back in like I don't know if it was started in the 40s, but definitely it must have started in the 40s because they built their house in 53. or 54 when my dad was just born. It's a very gorgeous house, but 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I don't know when he stopped, but if you had a jukebox, cigarette machine, pinball machine, anything like that in Syracuse, chances are it came from him.
Oh, wow.
And my dad in high school was like worked for my grandfather, and my dad was like the repair guy, one of the repair guys. So, you know, he had this black leather toolbox that he would carry with him. And if you have a bar called like, hey, the pinball machine stopped working, Dad would have to go out there and fix it.
For 40 years.
Yeah, and I don't know how many like Dad. I know Dad was doing that when he was in high school because of the stories that his friends have, and his nickname was the Doctor because it looked like he had like a doctor's, you know, old school like doctor's house leather bag with him was his toolbox. But
Pinball doctor.
yeah, but Dad would go out there and fix those machines, and like I said, I know my grandparents had money. They weren't like multi-millionaires by any stretch of the imagination, but upper middle class for sure. And but I don't know if there were ever times that my dad growing up ever knew, or my uncles, God rest their souls, if they ever knew my grandfather struggling as a business owner and ever had any of that. I mean, back in the day, you know, all the stereotypes of like old, especially my grandfather was a very stern man, very loving and caring overall, like, you know, would always hand out money and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, but very stern man. I'll never forget, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, we were out at the lake house, and I was fishing, and I had a lure with like the treble hook, and I went to cast behind my back, and the lure I had hooked myself. I had hooked myself under my shoulder blade. And so when I went to cast, like the hook got, you know, the lure was stuck in my back. And, you know, like 7 or 8 years old, I'm freaking out and crying, and I'm in so much pain and da 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 da. My grandfather, who was in his early 80s at the time, who used to just sit in front of the television at camp all day and just watch AMC and old Westerns, he came out with a magnifying glass and a pair of needle nose pliers. And I remember came out and looked at it, and he said, all 3 hooks are in. I can't do anything. You have to go to the doctor to like have them take it out. And then he just went back inside and was like watching TV, you know, watching AMC movies. So like that was kind of my grandfather's like really stern, just personality, but incredibly loving and caring, always handing out money to us every time, and giving my parents tons of money when we were growing up. So I can't imagine that if his business was struggling when my dad was a little kid, that there was like conversations, you know, about that, like in front of the family, where Grandpa was like, you know, so-and-so didn't, you know, pay for their you know, whatever the fuck. But I don't know. We live in a time where emotional health is like obviously a big thing, and people being open and honest and vulnerable, and, you know, going to see, you know, therapy, blah, 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 right? It's like share your feelings, be open and honest, which has its value for sure.
That's why I'm here, to share my feelings.
Right.
About politics.
Yeah. I think in some cases it can be too much. You don't need to share your feelings all the time. Sometimes you just need to not all the time, but there are sometimes. Sometimes I don't need to call a friend every time that I'm struggling with something. Sometimes I just need to bite the bullet, suck it up, and figure it out and move forward. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of times I need to call you, or I don't need to call Keith because Keith will just make fun of me. But
it's so negative.
Yeah. I need to call you or my dad and just talk about shit. But sometimes I just need to fucking bite the bullet and sit down and figure it out and not talk to anybody about it.
So I think a little bit of that is a mixed bag of healthy and not healthy. Like, so I think about like, the story about your grandfather, which is very freaking disturbing, by the way. and now explains a little bit about you. Like, you just walking around the dock with a hook in your back. Like, did he give you a cell phone to call 911?
I don't think there were cell phones at the time.
So to that,
no, the rest of the family was also there when that happened, and so my parents were out, but my sister took me to the.
I was thinking it was just him and you, and he just left you out of the dock all by yourself.
That's hilarious.
But either way,
I probably would be a lot tougher of a person if that were the case. If there no one else was there and he just left me and said the emergency room's in Auburn, go figure it out.
Well, back then, let's say, although I wasn't substantially alive then, when you're going back to what you said about your grandfather and the stresses of his business back then, but I'm sure there was a way, like if you brought your document folder home of unpaid bills, then I suppose you could take your work home with you in that, but there wasn't a computer even.
Yeah.
Now it comes home with you on your cell phone. So there's, for better, for worse, there's no way to not bring it home and let it bleed over into family. Well, when the stress bleeds over into the family, that kind of is like, ugh.
Yeah.
When the fun stuff, like, hey, we got this new product and Eloise and Wyatt did the artwork on it. Oh, that's a fun aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
That is a positive thing to bring home from the business. But like, if you're in a restaurant business, there's not very many very positive things to bring home. But even in the pinball doctor business, like, there's a lot of stresses that go on, in work, and it's all on you. And maybe he's got 10 employees, and those 10 employees' families all rely on you. There's a lot to bring, to fold back over on one person. But if you can leave it, like leave that document folder at work or leave your cell phone for work at work, it may or may not be more healthy. I don't know. If I knew anything about mental health and how to manage stress in a restaurant business, I probably wouldn't have gotten into the business to begin with.
There's a story my dad has when he was in high school of him going out to a bar to fix one of the machines. And he went back to my grandfather's office and shop to drop something off on his way home. And it was late at night. And as he was walking in, he saw a light on in the office, and he walked into the office. And my grandfather sat in the middle of the room in a chair with 6 men in suits surrounding him. And when my dad opened the door, my grandfather looked at him and said, "Robert, turn around and go home. Go to your mother and don't mention this to anyone." So I'm sure that my grandfather had to deal with certain things. Back in the day, he opened up an arcade essentially on Erie Boulevard before there were arcades, and it was like a version of Chuck E. Cheese. Play a pinball machine and win prizes. And he was arrested. It was on the front page, or I don't know if it was the front page, but it was in the post. The local newspaper. Local mobster Anthony Tringali gets arrested for gambling or whatever it was. Whatever they called it.
We got in trouble for gambling.
Did you?
Yeah.
At Buried Acorn?
Yeah.
How?
You're not supposed to have more than 11 bingo nights per year. And we were doing it on a monthly basis.
Hold on. I need to text the client.
And it's very the gaming commission is on it. It's not like the SLA, the liquor authority, where they're absolutely not paying attention to what anything else anybody's doing. And the only way that they execute anything if a competitor weaponizes their system.
Really?
But the gaming commission, they know. They search for bingo. They say, "Oh, you got too many bingo nights."
Really?
Yeah. I think 11 per year is even if it's free and there's no prizes given out.
That's wild.
And I might be wrong about that part. I might be wrong about all that, but that's kind of where we ended up. But my inability to understand the law is not so much that as it is I don't care to. And so breaking the law is kind of fun, even if it is putting my entire family's financial future in the balance.
I just sent a text to the owner for a client who we just started doing bingo.
Yeah, I think you have to take a month off per year.
That's hilarious.
It's something like that. They take gaming very seriously, as your grandfather knows.
Yes, yeah. My dad also has a story of when he had his restaurant. He used to buy produce from one of the guys down at the regional market. And he like pulled up to the dock out there, was like loading the produce into his truck, and they were like standing on the dock talking to the owner of the produce company, and the owner said to my dad, "Hey Bobby," he said, "look down at the end of the line. You see that car down there with the two guys in there in the suits?" And my dad was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Those are the feds. They've been following me around."
Because of your pinball gambling ring?
Well, they were following the produce guy around, not my father or family.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
So,
well, I would like to take a break because I have to pee real bad.
yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Welcome back, Tim.
Hey, thanks. Bathroom break went really, really well. While I was in the bathroom draining, I was thinking of something. I was like, the aromatics in this bathroom remind me a little bit.
The aromatics?
The aromatics in this bath. I was thinking like the volatiles coming off of whatever was in there prior to me was a little reminiscent of, remember when I was drinking this beer and I was like, oh, it kind of has this like sweaty, like, what else? I don't know if I didn't use the word sweaty, but it has like a little stank to it, you know, like a cheese, like a little bit of a cheese kind of a dealie going. And I just realized that I also smelled that in the restroom. And I'm not trying to be funny. I actually am trying to deduct and investigate the circumstances here. I also realized that, coming back to the beer, that it's not the beer itself. It's actually this microphone. And so this microphone has an aromatic quality to it, similar to the bathroom. I want to ask you one thing. Was there a dirty politician that both spoke on this microphone and also used your bathroom?
No, John Mannion has not been in.
Oh, it smells like dirty politician in there.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
John Mannion? Or what's the other guy?
Congressman Brandon Williams is who I had on the show.
Right.
John Mannion is the Democrat who is his, opponent who...
People like him and don't like him. It's like everybody, right? So I got a question. Why didn't you have them both on at the same time? That would have been fucking awesome.
Because I'm not going to do that to them. It might be interesting to do that. Like, my thought has always been that if I have both of them on at the same time, that I wouldn't be able to control, especially this time, especially this election, and this is a very contested seat position, especially for Onondaga County, that I wouldn't be able to control and I wouldn't want to control if they start arguing or calling each other names or whatever the case is. Like, as much as I enjoyed talking to Brandon Williams on the podcast, and I think he's overall, just from my conversation with him, not following his politics, not knowing any decisions that he's made or things that he's voted in favor of, blah, 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 blah. Having the conversation with him alone on the podcast, I really enjoyed talking to him. I think he's a solid person just from the 45 minutes to an hour that I got to hang out with him. Having said that, his campaign has sent out some of the most ugly things during this run about his opponent from text. I get so many fucking text messages from his campaign that are just like, did you know John Mannion did this? Did you know? And like the Republicans definitely, whoever's running his campaign, I don't know. I don't want to live in a fucking society where like that's tolerated, where it's okay. And it's, unfortunately, I feel like it's most of America.
It's the norm.
It has become the norm. Now, having said all that, I said this to Brandon on the podcast. I wish the camera's on.
I missed.
I said this to Brandon on the podcast. It's so easy for me, even if I consider myself to be really up on things that are happening in Congress and things that he's done and decisions he's made, whatever. I could have my opinion on it, even if I'm the most well-educated and up-to-date on all of his issues. But if you aren't there in the rooms, there's no way that you know the truth. Right. And so all of us as citizens are making determinations based on a lack of information. Even if we investigate things to the fullest extent, we still don't know the truth. And so it is, like, in my opinion, voting for people, no matter what office they're in, unless you're going to sit down and have a cup of coffee with somebody that's running for office, you have no idea who the fuck they are, what they're, what they believe, what they think, all that kind of, like, you just don't know these people. And it's kind of a fucked up system, in my opinion, to go into a polling place or a voting place and cast your vote for someone that you do not know who that person is. Now, I started doing the dinner with the candidates thing 7 years ago, just as a blog before I even had the podcast, when I had first moved back to Syracuse and Ben Walsh was first running for mayor, and there was like 8 people had thrown their name in the hat to run for mayor. And I thought to myself, I don't know who these people are. I'm now back in Syracuse as a resident. I'm going to vote for them. I'm going to reach out to every single one of them, take them out for dinner, and see if I can just have a conversation with them and get to know them just for my own sake of being a citizen of Syracuse. And so I did that with like 4 of the candidates that year, and it was a lot of fun. It was great to sit there and talk with them. Then the second election, I did it, but I recorded it. I did a podcast. I did it with Khalid Bey and with Ben Walsh.
Were they opposition of mayor candidates? Is that what it was?
So Khalid was Democrat, Ben's an independent, Ben was the incumbent. And I recorded that video and put it out there, and it was it was a lot of fun for me just to be able to sit down and talk with them. Now, coming into this election, I was like, all right, well, it would be really cool if I could interview a congressman, and then just for the sake of not trying to show bias, I'll see if I can interview John Mannion also. John Mannion's office is like ignored 7 different forms of contact that I've tried to send them over the last month, Instagram DMs, phone calls, and emails. Finally, somebody responded to my email and said, it's incredibly unlikely that the senator is going to be on your podcast before Election Day. You can talk to him after Election Day, possibly. I was like, okay, well, I'm only inviting him on because I had the congressman on the podcast, and that was it. No response. So, I think it would be fun. Like next year, the race for mayor is going to be happening in cities across New York. My hope is to be able to, if I can pull together the production team, because it is going to require a lot of production. My hope is to travel from Buffalo down to New York City and interview the top candidates for mayor in each major city: Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and then New York City. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But listening to like Joe Rogan's podcast, when he had Andrew Yang on, when he had Bernie Sanders on, 2 people I never would have thought to vote for. But having them on the podcast for 3 hours and getting to hear them talk about their politics, their views on things, why they believe what they believe, I was like, okay, I now understand it. I now understand where you're coming from,
So this isn't something, as you know, as a friend of mine, that I don't really pay too close attention to this stuff except for what comes across, the propaganda that comes across my eyeballs.
Yeah.
But do you think that people hate, because it's hate, do you think people hate, what is it, whoever, what are they running for, senators?
Congress.
So they want to be Congress people. Yeah. Do you think that people hate idea of a Democratic congressperson or a Republican congressperson? They hate that position. Like whoever goes in that position, if they're on the other side of the argument, they're going to hate that person, right? They're going to whatever. I think they more just hate that position of a Republican senator or a Democratic senator. They just hate that position. Knowing the person, does it really affect the way that they make decisions, right? Because there's a lot of influence. Like you said, you were very interested in what it's like to go and walk into a senator floor or congressman floor or whatever that is. And those folks are like, a window for you to see that, which is really neat. But now that you know more about that person, do you think that person's, and it probably depends on the level of what's at stake in that political position. But do you think that person's like, because I consider myself to be a pretty good person. I don't know that I would make really good decisions as a politician just based on me being a good guy. And I think a lot of that might have to even possibly go out the window, because there's a lot of really hard decisions that no good person can make that decision because they're too torn, really. So I wonder, I wonder if a politician can even really dig deep into what they personally believe in the process of making a decision. First, from like what I've seen, they have a lot of freaking decisions to make, not most of which, but probably a portion of which they don't put much thought into, because there's a lot that goes on in the government that is, like decisions. There's a lot. Sometimes they sign stuff because that's what this Republican senator position does. They sign this bill because we're all together on the blue side or the red side, or what,
for sure.
So how much does listen, I don't really believe in this, come into play, even if it, because it's possibly that, okay, I believe this, but overall for the community, that it might be better to just, figure out a way to have money for people first, or, to make the economy better, or, as opposed to like taking a stand against poverty. Well, what do? Do you make a decision to have an aquarium?
Yeah.
Because the aquarium will eventually, possibly, it's just like in restaurant business, possibly make out and like have revenue for the city, jobs for the city. Employees can come in and get a job working at this aquarium or building the aquarium, whatever it might be. Or does it make more sense to push that money and say, listen, we have some people that are in very, very, very dire need, right, in our community. Do we say, okay, let's give them a charity of some sort, like, and does being a good or bad person in an interview on a podcast allow you to use that part of your personality to actually make that decision? Like, these are decisions that everybody thinks that they want to be like in charge of, like, oh, that guy, boo, this guy, yay. But that's a hard gig, man.
Yeah. I mean, just talking to him about, he was like, my wife and I have to decide. I mean, he's a yes, it's really awesome. It's really cool to be a congressman. I shouldn't say cool. It's a very prestigious position for sure. Yeah. Having said that, in the grand scheme of who are you, I mean, aside from just having the title congressman, nobody outside of, unless you make national headlines, nobody knows who the fuck you are outside of your district. And I'm sure most of the people in your district don't even know who you are. But Brandon was saying, he's like, my wife and I like have to just choose where we're going to go out to eat, because if they have a TV, especially during campaigning season, and we're going to be sitting down trying to have a nice dinner together, husband and wife, and then all of a sudden it's like Brandon Williams is going to kill your dog, allegedly. So,
have you seen the Trump thing? There's like a song about Donald Trump, and they were like, I'm eating the dogs. I'm eating the cats. I don't know what the fuck that is, but it's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very disconnected from that, but I saw like it was like a thing like, immigrants are eating your dogs or something. Well, that was enough for me. I'm like, that's funny.
I had this thought after the podcast with Brandon of there's so many things that people say like that about Springfield, which I was talking to my brother about this, who's the FBI agent in Cincinnati, and part of his area is Springfield.
What do you mean Springfield?
Springfield, Ohio, is where there's like a mass, is where there's a lot of Haitian immigrants.
Oh, this is the immigrants are killing eating your dogs. Sorry,
Trump said that.
I really don't know the story. I just heard a song on TikTok.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing as like some of the immigrants that were here in Syracuse that were like, remember from a few years ago, it was like, they're eating, like they're fishing daily in Onondaga Lake, and that's how they're getting their food. And it's like, well, that's going to kill them, you know? And so, but like you hear some of these stories, and I was just thinking to myself, like, why don't I just fly to that area? I can't, I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to like, deprive my wife of like having me there to help with our son.
That's tough, yeah.
To just say, all right, I'm going to go to Springfield for a couple of days and walk around and see if I can find out if this is true, There's a story, and we'll end with this.
No, we're going to end with this. Okay, you got to end with what
There's a story. There's a book I read years ago, written back in the 70s. Peter Jenkins, two-part book, 2 books for the same thing. It's called A Walk Across America. And back in the 70s, he graduated from Alfred State. And
It's a cool time, the 70s. Not that I wasn't alive. Oh, I was for 2 years, but I was very little.
And so he was graduated and then didn't have anything to do, so he stayed on as like a janitor at the college. And this is like during the war, and so I think Vietnam.
Is this the Good Will Hunting story?
No.
Oh, keep going. Keep going.
So it's like Vietnam, whatever year that was. Maybe I have the decades mixed up. Anyways, so he's one of the janitors at this college, older man who's like a Army veteran. He's also like the head janitor. They're back in like their office one day, and Peter is like complaining about America and the country sucks and the politics and the war, man. And finally the retired veteran says to him, "What the hell do you know about the country? You've never left Alfred before." And so that like resonates with Peter, and he decides to train for like a summer, and then builds up stamina to set out on this journey walking across the country. And so he like zigzags the country. He goes from down to like South Carolina, and he like lives with this poor black family, like lives in this trailer park and lives with them for a little
initiative.
bit.
Wow.
And then, so he just like, but then he's like he's all over the country and lives in like a hippie commune for a couple weeks, and then
all from that one comment,
just all these different things. And it's funny, since then he's like an author that like he's traveled the world doing all these different things and writing books about it. But that's what he set out to do. And listen, obviously it's not possible for people to set out on like a cross country hike to try and figure shit out. But it's like even just looking at my Instagram comments while you're taking a piss. There's another local foodie in town who posts on my thing today, on the video I posted today. It says, "That's a grotesque looking sandwich." And it's a local restaurant that she has worked with in the past. And I feel like we're in a part of I don't know if it's the world, but it feels like it's definitely America, without me having traveled the country to know all the people around the country. But it feels like it's in America based off the internet. And that is people just being angry, people feeling like their opinion matters, which by and large, it doesn't matter, and feeling the need to express that opinion to anyone and everyone who will listen to them. And I feel like that's what's wrong with the country. Like, what's wrong with me interviewing Congressman Brandon Williams in the podcast is not the fact that he's a Republican that feels like abortion is wrong, which I also feel abortion is murder. It's the fact, what's wrong with it is the fact that there are so many people that comment on it and say the most hateful things about myself or about the congressman, or I don't care who you're saying them about, but just get online and say the most hateful, ugly things. I mean, listen, I'm also part of that problem. I mean, the first part of our conversation was me saying people are stupid for opening restaurants.
Well, that's pepperoni Tony coming out. You know what I mean? You go be bad. Like, nobody likes that.
Right.
But here's the thing about this forum. Okay. And that's why I thought of having both of the Congress people here, which I know you did try and get the other guy for like 2 separate podcasts, which is probably a much safer one, but you're not a safe guy. That's not like what you do. I know you're not a safe person, right?
It's more so just me not be like, I'm not trying to be safe as much as I'm just trying to say, like, I don't want to put myself in the position to have to go back and forth. It'd be more effective just to have a conversation with each one of them separately.
One thing about podcasting compared to CNN or whatever it might be, NBC and whatever news source that lobbyists are paying to create, right? You don't have a lobbyist saying, "This is the way we want you to steer this questions."
I wish I did. That money.
They get that money, but you don't have a lobbyist saying, "No, you can't ask that question," or "This is how this needs to be delivered in post-edit," and they come in and they say, like, maybe this comment was maybe too much, and they take it out or re-edit it or even redo it, what have you, which happens, whether it's for we didn't get the shot right or whether they want to redo it, This forum and forums like podcasts are not funded by anybody except for Brown Carbonic.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you don't have like an agenda. You might have your personal opinions that might bleed over, like, you know, what you just said about abortion, that might bleed over. But you're not like going into this like, oh, I want to try and get people to vote for Mannion or whatever the other guy, you know, like you don't have like an agenda there. Like people, when they're used to, they've been trained to know that if you go Fox, then that's a guy who likes Trump. But like Eat Local isn't a guy who likes Trump or Mannion or whatever. You're just having a like conversation about the world, right? Yeah. And when you have the entirety of the world has been trained to know now that every network is bought and paid for by maybe one or the other or a combination of both, whatever percentage, political parties, so they present information in a way that would sway someone to vote for Mannion or Williams. You know, those are the guys that someone's got to vote for that guy. Well, you don't have that. You're just like trying to have an open conversation, and honestly, like it's a service to people, whether it makes them uncomfortable or not. And uncomfortable enough to put themselves out there in a sad way, to be like, oh, and then just hate you. Because like, regardless of what you believe, you're just trying to put some honest information on there, which isn't like, you know, biased in any way, that isn't like personally tied to you or tied to something that isn't you. Let's say like a lobbyist of some sort.
Yeah. You have to go.
I do. I got to go open the bar.
And I have to go attack some people on Instagram
who
don't agree with my opinion.
Pepperoni Tony's coming out. Look out, baby.
Thanks, Tim. Everybody get down and check out Buried Acorn Brewing Company.
We've got really old beer.
Van Rensselaer.
Later.